우리 모든 참가자들에게 가장 지금 궁금한 사항은 과연 미래 직업은 어떻게 변화할 것이고 우리는 어떻게 학습해야 될 것인가, 이 문제가 될 겁니다. 자, 지금부터 90분 동안 시작하겠습니다. 우선 제가 모두 발언을 7, 8분 정도 하고, 그리고 오늘 참석하신 강연자 분께서 대략 20분 정도 발표를 하시게 될 겁니다. 그리고 우리가 약 10분 정도 상호 토론을 하고 여러분들께서 주신 질문에 대한 의견들을 상호 토의하도록 하겠습니다. 우선 저는 미래 사회 변화는 아마 우리 인류가 겪어왔던 어떤 변화보다도 큰 변화가 오고 있다고 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그 변화의 중심에는 바로 4차 산업혁명의 핵심이 되고 있는 인공지능이 자리하고 있죠. 이제 우리 미래 직업은 많은 직업들이 인간 단독으로 하는 직업이 아니고 인간과 인공지능이 협업하는 직업이 될 겁니다. 미래 사회는 결국 인간과 인공지능의 경쟁이 아니고 인공지능을 활용하는 인간과 그렇지 않은 인간의 경쟁이 될 것이다. 그렇다면 직업은 어떻게 될 것인가? 직업은 크게 우리는 하나의 job이란 것은 여러 개의 태스크로 나누어지게 되어 있죠. 이 여러 개의 태스크를 우리가 분리해 보면은 반복되는 하는 일을 하는 이 반복되는 일, 그리고 창조적인 일, 협력하는 일, 이 세 가지로 나누어지게 될 겁니다. 이 세 가지 일의 특징을 보면은 반복되는 일은 인간보다 인공지능에 적합한 일들이 많이 있죠. 그리고 반복되는 일들은 대부분 우리 인간들이 하기 싫어합니다. 뭐라고 얘기하느냐? 삽질이라고 얘기를 하고 있습니다. 이게 영어로 번역이 될지 모르겠습니다만은, 예. 자, 그래서 이 반복되는 삽질은 우리 하기 싫어요. 이것을 우리 인간이 아닌 인공지능에 맡기고 인간은 창조적이고 협력적인 일을 할 수 있다면 굉장히 좋은 사회가 될 수 있을 겁니다. 자, 그런 일을 하려면 우리는 뭐가 필요하냐? 인공지능과 더불어 일하는 그러한 능력을 키워나갈 필요가 있죠. 그렇다면 우리는 이렇게 정리를 할 수 있을 겁니다. 모라베기의 패러독스에서 이렇게 얘기를 하죠. 로봇이 잘하는 것은 인간이 못하고 인간이 잘하는 것은 로봇이 못한다. 다시 말해서 이 인공지능 로봇과 인간의 상호 보완적인 관계를 위해서 우리가 나눠야 될 것은 반복되는 지금까지 교육은 반복되는 컨텐츠를 가르치는 교육이었습니다. 이 반복되는 컨텐츠를 가르치는 교육의 시대는 이제 점점 끝나고 있다. 그러한 교육은 이제 네이버와 구글에 물어보면 답을 해주고, 그리고 인공지능 챗봇에 물어보면 답을 해준다. 우리 인간의 교육의 중심은 이제 창조와 협력의 교육으로 가야 된다. 창조와 협력. 그래서 제가 이러한 창조와 협력 교육을 위해서 2009년도에 카이스트의 중학생들을 1년에 80명 뽑아서 교육하는 프로그램을 지금까지 해오고 있습니다. 여기 아마 그 프로그램에 관계된 학생들이 와 있을 것 같은데 한번 손 들어 보실래요? 예, 맨 앞에 앉아 있네요. 질문도 많이 했어요. 예, 문제 드릴 겁니다. 예. 그래서 제가 이 친구들을 뭐라고 그러느냐? 협력하는 괴짜라고 부르고 있어요. 이제 미래 사회는 창조성이 뒷받침해야 되니까 협력해야 되겠죠. 그 괴짜가 돼야 되겠죠. 근데 괴짜가 개별적으로 일을 하면은 아웃풋이 나오는 게 없습니다. 그들은 협력해야 됩니다. 자, 인간과 인간이 창조성을 바탕으로 협력을 하고, 그리고 그들은 인공지능을 활용할 줄 알아야 된다. 저는 이러한 미래 변화가 미래 교육 변화, 미래 직업을 위한 교육 혁신의 핵심이라고 보고 있습니다. 자, 그렇다면 그걸 위해서 우리는 뭘 해야 될 것이냐? 저희들이 해야 될 일은 창조와 협력을 뒷받침하는 교육은 어떤 교육인가? 지금 중고등학교, 대학교의 일반적인 교육은 창조와 협력의 교육이 되지 않고 있습니다. 그러면 이들을 위해서 우리가 전체적인 교육들은 이젠 프로젝트 중심 교육으로 대전환을 해야 되고, 이러한 프로젝트 중심 교육의 가장 중요한 것은 문제를 발굴하는 능력과 이러한 결과를 상호 평가하는 능력이 돼야 될 겁니다. 그래서 이러한 오프라인의 팀 프로젝트 중심의 교육을 이제는 온라인을 바탕으로 한 기존 교육은 시간 확보를 위해서 온라인으로 이동을 할 필요가 있게 되겠죠. 그래서 반복되는 교육은 소위 유튜브와 같은 온라인 인터넷 사이트에 올린 무크 교육이 되고, 그것의 문제, 소위 집중도 문제를 보완하기 위해서 필요한 것이 플립 러닝이 뒷받침하게 되겠죠. 그리고 그들은 다시 상호 협력을 통해서 문제를 풀어나가고 스스로 발전시키는 일을 해나가야 될 겁니다. 자, 이러한 우리가 미래의 교육을 통해서 새로운 교육의 방향들이 나올 텐데, 놀랍게도 2009년도에 저희가 카이스트의 IPCEO를 만들 때만 하더라도 무슨 그런 프로그램이 있겠냐 그랬지만은 지금은 전 세계의 주요 교육 프로그램이 거의 비슷한 형태로 가고 있습니다. 이것은 이제 시대 변화가 요구하는 인재상에 대해서 어느 정도 컨센서스가 만들어지고 있다는 의미가 되지 않나 생각이 됩니다. 제 입장에서는 이제 이러한 교육에 대해서 세 분의 연사께서 각자 갖고 계신 여러 가지 생각을 가지고 말씀을 주실 겁니다. 제가 얘기 길게 하는 것보다 정말 전 세계에서 온 석학들의 얘기를 지금부터 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그럼 우리 박수 한번 치고, 우선 첫 번째 강연을 해주실 분은 돈 버클리 박사님이십니다. 돈 버클리 박사님은 회사 이름이 아주 재미있어요. 리와인드, 리셋, 포워드입니다. 그러니까 우리 게임하는 거하고 똑같아요. 자, 리와인드하고 리셋하고 포워드 할 수 있죠. 우리 버클리 박사께서는 믿음이 하나 있습니다. 디자인 싱킹 방법에 의해서 이 세상에 많은 복잡한 꼬여있는 문제들을 풀 수 있을 것이다. 자, 이러한 생각을 가지고 쓰신 책이 최초의 웹사이언스 시리즈 책 중에 하나인 인터랙티브 사이언스란 책을 쓰셨죠. 자, 지금 돈 박사님께서는 이러한 일을 바탕으로 회사를 설립한 것이 바로 리와인드, 리셋, 포워드란 회사를 설립해서 이 디자인 싱킹 프로세스를 바탕으로 창조성 교육을 어떻게 많은 학생들에게 전파하느냐 하는 일련의 사업을 하고 있고, 동시에 콜롬비아 유니버시티의 교수로도 재직을 하고 계십니다. Mr. Don, Dr. Don, I wanted to ask you your presentation.
Yeah, I'm first.
Yeah.
If you want.
Yeah, you are the
Okay.
first.
All right. Is that a clicker? Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks. Okay. Hello, everyone, and thanks for staying with us for the last session of the day. That's me. And this morning we heard from the former Swedish Prime Minister, and he talked about reinventing yourself. Well, I have 6 times. I started work as an industrial chemist. Then I started a PhD program at Imperial College London, and whilst there, I worked as a freelance photographer, taking pictures of bands and at fashion shows. My third job was as a teacher. I taught chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer science. The next thing I did was I became a director of innovation at the school at Columbia University. There it was my job to reach outside and bring in any innovations to the school. Then I became an author, and I've authored 20 science books for kindergarten through 8th grade. And now I work as a design thinker, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So if you were to ask me what is the future skills we need for jobs, essentially it's all about solving problems and coming up with solutions. Sometimes many solutions, and sometimes those solutions change from week to week. So we cannot believe that if we solve something once, that that's it, and we can put it away. We need to think differently about this. And to do that, one of the methodologies that I teach and what I use is a problem-solving methodology called design thinking, which comes from Stanford University D School. That's where I learned about it. And you'll see the process in front of you here. It starts by defining a problem and eventually lets you come up with ideas. That's called ideation. And ideas are not solutions. Sometimes that's often mixed up. If someone has an idea, they think it's a solution, but it's not. It's an idea. An idea has to be executed into a solution. But before you come up with a solution, you really need to prototype. And that means it's a possible solution. And you go through the iteration cycle till you come up with a final possible solution. So, I need to get my notes. I want to talk to you about STEAM. Thanks. Which is very topical in the education sphere right now. And STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So the thing is, in education, we tend to compartmentalize our understanding of the world into subjects, like science, like art. We're sort of misled into thinking that all of these things are separate, but guess what? They're not. For a true understanding of the world, we require interconnections between many disciplines. Example, if we want to solve for climate change or wealth inequality, this cannot be tackled in a single isolated discipline. We need to converge these disciplines together, and STEAM is a really good start. STEAM is an educational approach to learning that combines these disciplines being the science, technology, engineering, math. Engineering and math, correct. So originally, pre-STEAM came STEM, but if we just focus on STEM, we lose the divergence of the process. So that's why there's been a big shift over into STEAM, sometimes called design and engineering. So what are the outcomes we would want from what we learn in school? These are the really big, broad stroke outcomes. They're very important for the future work world. If there's a new one here, write it down and look it up. You may know all of these, but pick one and Google it. See what it says. What is an innovator's mindset? So we have a quick understanding of what STEAM might be, but what would STEAM look like in a school? There's a lot of words here, a lot of words, but this would be, if you were to design a STEAM program for a school, you might include all or some of these. Again, if there's a new word here that you haven't seen, jot it down, look it up. But this is an overall kindergarten through 12th grade of what we need to be teaching and learning. Here what I have is another example of a STEAM curriculum in a school, but specifically designed for high school. And look what it ends with. It ends with entrepreneurship, which is a huge part of what we need to be teaching in high school. Often that waits till we go to college. But we really need to think about bringing entrepreneurship curriculum down into the high school level. And the perfect place for it is a STEAM curriculum or a design engineering curriculum, where if you're designing, you're building, well, how do we bring that service or product to market? So I want to show you in detail one STEAM project. There's so many I could show, but I'm choosing this one because it was one of the earlier ones that I did that was highly successful. I call this an extreme project because, as you will see, it's not just students and teachers involved in this. There's designers, there's engineers, there's furniture makers, there's marketers. So what we need to think about the future of education is bringing what I call the outside in. Who else can we bring in to educate our students? Because teachers can't do it all. So we call this project Tools at Schools. And the design challenge we gave to 14-year-olds in a school in New York, 44 of them, was, hey, you sit at a desk every day, you sit on that chair for 5 hours, you use your locker. Who else could be better to reimagine these products but a student who actually is immersed in them every day? So with the 44 students and 10 teachers, we started this process of how would you, if you had a chance to reimagine a desk, a chair, or a locker, what would you do? So it starts out by the students doing their research. That means talking to other students about chairs, talking to other students about desks or lockers. In this case, what we did was we broke the students up into teams of 3, and each team chose a desk, a chair, or a locker. We built out these research boats for them, which made it easy for them to collect their research. A big part of this process was students presenting to each other students their ideas and getting feedback. That's a very important thing, which is called an iteration, or that you show them your ideas and you get feedback. And you can usually improve on that. So here you see some of the students presenting to other students, but they're also presenting to designers and engineers and the head of school and other teachers. This shows you an example of the first stage of the research that the students did, okay? And you can see here they identified the problems and they came up with possible solutions, okay? So one part of the search here is how boring some desks can be. So students say desks are boring. Well, then I say, you tell me what boring is. How can you make a desk unboring or a chair unboring? So here, they're really trying to define the problem. So the other big thing about solving problems is if you're not inspired, you'll never really solve that problem. And what I want you to go away with today is to be inspired. That is all I can help you to do today, is not teach you design thinking and all of the complexities around that, but to inspire you with this project. So the students built out these mood boards which gathered their inspiration and showed them to each other and got feedback. So where's the content, you're asking? Where's the engineering? Where's the science? Where's the math? Well, here's the math. If you're building out prototypes, we really need to know how to measure these. You know, how will the chair stand? Will it topple over? What size does it have to be? What sort of material you're using? That's about chemistry. Is it about leather? Is it about plastic? Is it just about wood? Okay? So here the students had to deal with area, with scale. And after they did all their research and did their mood boards, then what we had to do is get them to distill it into one idea. So how could you take all that information and write a paragraph around it so that it makes sense? And that we call the big idea. And that's where the students, again, would stand up to an audience of their peers, of their faculty, of designers, of administrators, whoever it is, parents, to put their idea in front of that audience. And that is a great communication skill, again, that we really have to learn for future, or even for now. Once they had that big idea, they went off and they had to do their initial sketches. So they sketched here. You can see some quick sketches of the chair. That's really called a thumbnail. Sketch out quickly what you think that chair is. So after they do this sketch, they then bring it into a 3D model. So here we have a very rough prototype. You can see here what the student is showing is what he called a collaboration table. So a table that you could sort of fit a lot of people around it. You also see a prototype of a locker here, done in very basic materials. These are what we call low-res prototypes. You don't need to use a 3D printer yet. We can use that later when we have a high-resolution prototype. So first of all, we get a low-resolution prototype. Look at the one down in the corner here, which looks like a desk with something hanging off it. And you'll see how these developed later in the project. These were about accessorizing the desk. And here, just a compilation of where we're partway through the project. You see some sketches, you see the mood boards, you see the students getting feedback from Johan here, and another prototype. And at this point, what we do is we hand off the sketches to real designers in a studio. So again, bringing the outside in, not just teachers, we bring in professionals. And the professionals start to sketch up the ideas of the students. And the students are here giving them feedback. So here's one student looking at what these designers have come up with. You see in the bottom the designers working in the studio and giving the feedback. We have a little video here. Could we play this from the back? Because
So for the last 12 weeks, the students have been working on developing their big idea that they presented last time. They've been validating them, getting their hands dirty, really trying to figure out what's working and what's not. I'm sure there's going to be some surprises, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how they edited all their ideas down to their final design proposal.
We've been working on a project called
Tools for Schools project.
We started out by drawing something on paper, so we basically mapped out our plans.
Right now we're just trying to make our sketch look three-dimensional.
We made this one. It didn't work out too well. The first two weren't really that
Successful.
So I made that model, but after looking at it and thinking about that 6 times larger, it wasn't going to look right.
We realized that our idea wasn't very realistic.
We had a sketch and we had to figure out all the dimensions that it would be. Since we're making a model, we had to make proportions.
My favorite part was coming up with a 3D model.
It's easier to try and shape something to what you already know it's going to look like than try and shape something you have no idea how it's going to end up looking like.
The students presented their ideas better than most adults we know. I think anybody would benefit from a design class.
Our thing is called Paulins.
This is the air chair.
Very enjoyed.
We called ours Mesh. Presenting the chair, Relaxing EDU.
The Tyreeka locker.
The innovative desk America's been raving about.
I was sick of sitting on hard plastic.
Students learn best when they're comfortable and relaxed.
Being comfortable but not too comfortable.
What we wanted to have in our chair, we wanted to have storage, wheels, extension for the length of the chair and the width of the chair, recline, armrests, and leg rests. Of course, we lowered that down.
Comfort, convenience, compatibility. And when you combine all 3 elements, you get our chair.
With this idea with the coat on the back, we were thinking what happens if someone wants to take off the jacket and hang it around their chair.
Because I was doing a science project and a lot of them fell on my chair, and then I sat down and I realized that they're comfortable to sit on.
I was thinking of having this as an accessory on the chair for sort of comfort.
The idea of just working together and like collaboration and feeding off of each other, because we think that school is more about everyone learning from each other rather than the teacher just giving like all the information to the students.
A lot of people can fit on one desk, then there wouldn't have to be that many in one classroom.
We have different accessories that could be easily attached to the side of the desk.
checking the walls of our locker right now.
We were doing our research, we noticed that there weren't a lot of modern lockers out there. It wasn't really fun for the students, and we thought we should fix that.
Engineering a locker that was silent but did its job well.
And we also have a doorknob on the front.
Color was a big inspiration.
I think design can really be anything that you want it to be as long as it's somewhat intentional, although you could unintentionally design something that could be great or magnificent and you didn't really set out to do that.
So that was about halfway through the products. So what did these final products look like when we brought in the designers and engineers? This is them. So we see some desks, chairs, and lockers here that were inspired, prototyped by the students, and brought into what's called a high-resolution prototype by the designers and the engineers. So the desk here, you'll see, if you remember the image from the prototype, which was about customizing the desk, the students thought, you know, the desk just didn't have to be for one thing. You know, could you have a math desk, an art desk? So they were able to accessorize these desks so the desk could have different functions depending on what content was being thought. Here's the desk again with some storage behind the chair, and the handle on top of the chair was for easy pickup of the chair. Actually, so this chair was really interesting because what the students built in was a fidget factor. What they said to me was that they didn't want to be just sitting, they wanted to move, so they built in a fidget factor so that they could move and exercise in the chair. This was another interesting insight from kids. Even though we are in a very digital age and everything's electronic, they like the idea of leaving personal notes in each other's lockers. And eventually, we built out these prototypes, which we showed at the International Contemporary Furniture Fair in New York, where the students actually won Best Design Awards, beating out universities for this very prestigious award. Thank you. And if I can leave you with that, one takeaway, I want you to be inspired. What can you take away from this? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Do. 자, 많은 질문들 올려주시기 바라고 다음은 우리 임정기 박사님의 발표를 들어보기로 하겠습니다. 임정기 박사님은 파슨스 대학에서 현재는 디자인으로 유명한 대학의 교수로 계시는데 원래는 제가 물어봤더니 인권법을 하셨대요. 근데 요즘은 디자인의 관점이란 것이 비주얼 디자인, 인터랙션 디자인, 그리고 커스터머 디자인을 넘어서 이제는 인간 삶 모든 부분을 디자인하고 있는 것 같습니다. 우리 임정기 박사님 얘기를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. Dr. Im, please.
예, 안녕하십니까. 지금 파슨스에서 디자인 전략과 경영과 그쪽의 과에서 장으로 있고 또 교수로 일을 하고 있는 임정기입니다. 잘 부탁드립니다. 제가 오늘 여기 서 있을 수 있는 거는 저에겐 솔직히 큰 영광입니다. 제가 한국에서 태어나서 또 자라왔으면서 제가 지금 여기서 교육에 대해서 얘기를 할 수 있는 거는 제 전에도 수많은 리더들이 비전이 있는 교육 정책이 있었고 또 제가 자랄 때부터 고등학교 때부터 중학교 때부터 초등학교 때부터 그리고 유치원 때까지 선생님들이 계셨기 때문에 지금 제가 여기에 존재할 수 있는 것입니다. In this context we're thinking about in these huge concepts in these conferences about the idea of industrial revolution or creative economy. Sometimes it's easy to get swept away on these big words And one of the ways we can engage and bring life into this conversation is focusing on the stories. So today I want us to focus on 4 stories around creative economy and the people that I met throughout my journey. And the first story begins in Mumbai. Earlier this year, I was invited by Indian School of Design Innovation to come and observe the students and their work. So I'm in this conference room. I'm sitting there. And in front of me is this film that comes out. And this film, a short film, was one of the most powerful films that I've ever seen. And it's a story of an actor who has started to take on a new role in a play that he was uncomfortable with because the role that he was playing was a social taboo. But as more and more he engaged in this role, his demeanor started to change, his identity started to change, his sexual orientation comes to questions, and it affects his relationship, both professional and personal. So it's a very complex story, and it's been really captured in a New York or Hollywood style of a wonderful cinematography. And the creator behind this short film is Vaidei. And then one of the fascinating aspects of this story is that Vaidei has never taken a film class. So, 30 minutes film. For every second that we have in the short film, that involves tremendous amount of work. You have to come up with a script, and that idea becomes a storyboard. Storyboard becomes an action scenes and shot lists, and then you have to bring people to shoot different things, and then you have to edit this film. You got to put scores, and you got to engage in different distribution right. It's a tremendous work, but Vaidei has never learned any of this in her school. In fact, she was able to create a powerful cultural product and cultural artifact without a specific training. 우리가 생각을 했을 때 뭔가 새로운 거를 창조하는데 그 창조하는 순간에 그 창조하는 과정에 있어서 그에 대한 스페시픽한 다른 교육이 따로 없었다는 거였죠. That draws me to a question. And this question kind of stuck with me tremendously personally to me because I grew up in many places with different labels. I grew up in the country, our country, that has so much of a cultural resources and growing rapidly. And I was able to have an opportunity to study abroad and able to observe a very young country, but have a global city with so many influences. And throughout the experiences led me to being at Parsons, at the new school, that is able to focus on this idea of how can we be a leader, how can we create some values in this world of creative economy. And the key aspects here that comes out is that the notion of art and design used to be something more tangible, something more traditional. But as Parsons as an institution started to engage in this idea, has translated into different mediums of these arts have been applied. And these techniques and ideas has been applied into a specific industry. And from within the industry, you have to be able to take a step back and bring out that process of design into problem solvings. And those problem solving is now lead to a much more rigorous data analytics and visualization that can really impact and able to provide a tremendous value to business and organization, public sector governments throughout. In that space, one of the persons that I met at Parsons in our community is John. So John is one of the faculty members at Parsons, and he's a design strategist, meaning that he works on a lot of different projects. He applied the design strategy methodology into solving different problems. And one of the projects that he has recently done is called End of Life Project. An End of Life Project is an examination of people's end of life. So he had been engaged in for 4 years, over 4 years, following 5 individuals and their process and different stages of death. And the way he engaged with his team in these research subjects were very different. Traditional documentaries or studies would have been done some very separate from the subject themselves and able to kind of look at it from like a fly on the wall type of situation, observing how this process go. Instead, what he calls is end-of-life doula, where they're able to work and able to sit and listen and work with people who are actually in their hospital beds or in their home. They intervene and have conversation. They able to provide, help them when they're trying to stand up. They support in every activities where their research subject has believed as a notion of a good death. What this project has yielded to is one of the most powerful insights in this project. That John describes this project is not about death, but rather this project is about life at the proximity of its end. And that focus yields these projects and documentations, hours and 100 hours of footage that actually elevates humans' lives. And oftentimes in our society, senior citizens are in the shadow. They are the invisible. We are obsessed with youth and something look young. But this project's able to humanize processes that we all go through and to an extent we're afraid of. So the end-of-life project itself, one of the outcomes come out from this project is actually a feature-length documentary film that is being selected in New York Film Festival as we speak. And John now serves as an expert in the area of end-of-life and care, that he advises hospitals to businesses that want to focus on, and government policies that want to focus on making differences in the space of citizens, senior citizen care. All right, so that's the story of a professor. How about his students? So one of the students come out from Parsons Design Strategy and Management Project is Maurice. And Maurice is a Dutch. And being a Dutch, that Maurice had been thinking about the idea of body of water and the relevance throughout where he lives. So as Maurice was living in New York, going to school, he started to realize as the climate change is really affecting New Yorkers' lives, as each degree of temperature changes, their living condition can change dramatically. Also with tremendous climate change-induced weather events, extreme weather events, affects them tremendously. But what we also found is an apathy. People didn't care about these climate changes. They didn't really act upon. The government wasn't really putting onto measures that was able to solve this problem really quickly. So what Maurice ended up doing is applying what's called design research. He goes out and come up with different ways to actually understand the situation from multiple levels. So one of the things he conducted is doing a observational research. One aspect, he's able to unpack the colors and the color analysis of living spaces in these coastlines in Manhattan. He also conducted contextual interviews, talking with the real people on the streets and people who work there, really understand how they interact with this idea, how much they actually think about climate changes, how could it potentially affect their lives. These things lead to one of the prototypes. So in this case, he just put up a board. It's a low fidelity prototype. Puts it on the street. What did you first feel the effects of climate change? And then he see how people interacted with this initial prototype. Based on that insight, he come up with the second creative intervention. This time, he puts up a life jacket. If you live in Manhattan, you're gonna need this. And the New Yorkers reacted differently. Now there's something more colorful, something more visual, something tangible. Based on these insights, the final iteration of this project is a life jacket and an app. It's able to fulfill the both ends of able to emotionally appeal to New Yorkers about the effects of climate change and able to inform them. So he ended up installing these. This is in Union Square in New York. Installed in different public spaces in New York and observing how they interact with it. And you can see how striking this image is. For normal people to walk by, they see this bright red jacket that say, you're going to need this. And from that point on, people are engaging these ideas, engaged, and they interact with this concept. So that for the first time, for people are able to walk away from the ideas of climate change out of the newspapers or some organizational report. Rather, they're feeling it, they're seeing it, and within that context, they're seeing it in their own living space and able to process the information that makes sense to their lives. And that's just one example of how Maurice was able to create something very meaningful. Now, having graduated from Parsons, he works as an innovation consultant at different design studios in New York City. So those are the stories that I've been able to capture at New School, at Parsons. These are the places that we're able to create meanings as we're trying to think about what does creative economy means. And people who are creating something different and new are truly pioneers in a lot of this concept that can be something more than just providing a solution for simple bottom line. The last question that I'm most excited is a story of us. What are the stories that we can create? What are the stories that's happening in our country right now? What are the stories that are actually able to apply these ideas of design strategies and creative economy into something meaningful? What are the solutions that we can come up with that can actually lead to a sustainable growth of our country? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lim. Finally, I want to ask Ms. Margo to talk about human development. 우리 마고 박사님께서는 월드뱅크에서 근무를 하고 계시고 현재 수석 이코노미스트입니다. 여러 분야, 교육, 또 사회적 약자를 위한 일들을 30개국 이상에서 해오셨고 2010년도부터는 주로 에듀케이션 섹터에서 일을 하고 계시면서 보스니아, 헤르고비나 등의 고위급 자문을 하고 계십니다. 교육에 대해서 아마 특히 개발도상국을 포함한 교육의 변화에 대해서 좋은 말씀을 해주실 것으로 기대합니다. Please, Dr. Margo.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is indeed Margo Hoftijzer, and I was a senior economist, currently a consultant for the World Bank. After these great examples and stories that we heard from the previous speakers, I will more generally present a little bit about what is globally going on in the labor market now that this fourth industrial revolution is unleashed upon us, and specifically about what this means for the skills that are needed and how we can make sure that that students and workers get these skills. And I will specifically focus on a topic that has actually been already brought up by some of you in the audience during question sessions, and that relates to inclusion. Questions that were posed were when our economies are moving ahead so quickly, how do we make sure that everyone actually is brought along, and how do we avoid polarization among populations or society? I'll provide a few examples here and there, not to imply that they're universally applicable, but to just give you a little bit of a flavor. And in some cases also I'll refrain from examples, but I'll actually pose a few questions that I think remain a need to be answered on some quite important topics. The main messages actually of my presentation will be that there is actually a need to make sure that we look at foundational basic skills of people. A person like Maurice in our earlier stories, or the students who are designing, I think we can all agree that they need some basic skills in terms of literacy, numeracy, ability to interact. And what you'll see in my presentation is that there are actually quite a few individuals, children worldwide in low and high income countries who are actually unable to acquire even those basic skills. I'll also focus a little bit on adult learning and vocational education and training, because these seem to be two segments of the education system that are most in need of a rethink when we're talking about skills and future jobs. Now, because this is the last presentation of the day, and I know you're all tired, I thought I'd start with boring you with some graphs. No, actually, I'll go through this very quickly. These graphs I put in to illustrate that what we intuitively know about the changes in the skills that jobs require is actually evidenced by global data. As our moderator already mentioned earlier, what we see is that the type of tasks in jobs that are routine, that can be taken over by technology, routine manual, routine cognitive, are actually declining. We see a decrease in the intensity of those type of tasks. And then at the same time, we see an increase in the tasks that are complementary to technology, such as non-routine cognitive tasks or interpersonal tasks. And we see definitely this trend on the left side. You see these graphs for OECD countries, so the richer economies in the world, where these trends are very clear. But also on the right side in developing countries, it's maybe a little bit more cautiously still. But even there, we see those trends arising. Now, the World Economic Forum issued a publication and said, okay, right, we know how this task content of jobs is changing. What does this mean for the skills that are required of future workers? And it's a nice list of 10 skills here. Many of them you will have heard before. It's creativity, critical thinking, problem solving. So it's again these higher level cognitive, socio-emotional skills that will be increasingly important. I would personally add one important one that is perhaps already implicit in this list of 10, but it doesn't harm to clarify and to illustrate it clearly, and that is the ability to learn, which will be increasingly important when we're thinking about a labor market where people change jobs more often, but also where even the same type of jobs change very quickly, and people really need to be able to adapt to be able to have a productive career for, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years. Now, back to inclusion, and back to what I in the beginning already alluded to, and that is the need for everyone to have some basic level of foundational skills to be able to acquire these, let's say, more snazzy skills of creativity, or the higher level skills of complex problem solving. And I'm going to start with providing some information on low-income countries globally. I suppose this will not be a surprise to you, but we see that in many countries across the world, children or youth are not even going to school. This graph on the left is data from UNESCO. They estimate that over the entire world, there are about 250 million students currently out of school, and they're mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southern Asia. Those two areas take up about 200 million of the 250. And clearly, when we're talking about the need to acquire even basic skills, one of the first things that needs to happen is that children are in school. That's, however, not the whole picture, and this is what I'm trying to illustrate in the graph on the right, because not everyone who's in school is actually learning. On the right, I'm using the example of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where students at the end of primary school have been assessed for their reading and mathematics skills. And the share of students that at that age is sufficiently proficient, so they are able to do what they're supposed to do at the end of primary school, is abysmally low. It's about 30% for mathematics, 40% for reading, and this is not an exceptional country. We see this all over the developing world, and clearly there is an incredibly big challenge that remains to be addressed. This is not the place, I think, to be too elaborate on what the possible solutions are, but to give a few examples, I think someone already mentioned the very big opportunities offered by virtual learning and distance learning, not just of students, but also of teachers, which is especially important in those countries. Something a little bit more out of the box, I can give you the example of the government of the province of Sindh in Pakistan, who have been struggling with the very big challenge of teachers that don't show up in school when they're supposed to. And there was a tech-savvy permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education who was very keen to exploit the opportunities of automation, of technology, and who designed a project that ended up being financed by the Global Partnership for Education, where teachers are actually, their attendance is monitored every single day by biometric data. They need to check in with their thumbprints, and that is a fantastically and even relatively cost-efficient method to monitor a very important aspect, even in an environment that is generally still relatively low-tech. So this slide was about kids not learning in low-income countries. I said already, this is probably not a very big surprise to you. What you might be less familiar with is that also in rich countries, there still are a lot of challenges with making sure that everyone acquires even the basic skills of science, mathematics, and reading. What I'm showing you here are the assessment results in science for 15 years old. It's from the PISA assessment of the OECD, which is a very well-known and well-recognized international assessment method. And what I'm showing you on the left side is the OECD average, and then 4 countries, USA, Korea, Singapore, and Finland. And I specifically took those countries, first of all, because they're all performing above the OECD average, so they're good performers. I think we can safely say that all of them are more or less considered to be at the forefront of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Countries like Korea, Finland, and Singapore specifically are all 3 globally recognized for having excellent education systems. And in addition, Finland is also quite well known for making very successful efforts in being a very inclusive and equitable society. Nevertheless, when we look at students by a ranking of socioeconomic and cultural status, this is an index that's also provided by the OECD. It's a composite that looks at whether a student's parents are highly educated or not, whether they work, whether there's a television and a car in the house, etc. And what we see is quite staggering differences in performance. So the yellow bars are the average. These row lines, these red lines are the performance of students who are in the bottom quarter of this index of socioeconomic status. The green ones are the results from the students who are in the top quarter. And if you're wondering how big this difference is, what does that mean in practice? We roughly use the estimate that 30% in PISA score is equivalent to roughly 1 year of schooling. So for the OECD average and all those 4 example countries here, that means that there is 2 to 3 years of difference in the performance of students from the bottom and the top quarter of the socioeconomic index. And that's at the age of 15, which is obviously a massive delay or lag to then address in the rest of their school career. This is clearly not just an economic problem, but there are also quite fundamental social, politically, and I would argue moral reasons to try to address these very big gaps. The causes for why one gap exists in a country and is different from country to country. There are often very systemic challenges or constraints that relate to financing, teacher deployment, school autonomy, etc. But what I would like to do is to provide some very basic examples here of incredibly low-tech interventions to help address these gaps. And these are examples from the Netherlands on the left and Ireland on the right, where these are not public interventions. These are initiatives that are started by civil society or the private sector, where children are familiarized with the work of work. In the Dutch example, this is from a rather young age, between, let's say, 10 to 13 years old. And on the right side in Ireland, it's a mentorship program for students who are a little bit older. In both cases, they're targeted at students from disadvantaged households or schools that are in areas where there are a lot of disadvantaged households or vulnerable children. And in addition to familiarizing children with the world of work, which is in itself a good thing, these kind of interventions are assumed to help children build these really important socio-emotional higher order cognitive skills. And it is increasingly proven that the more they have a vision of what they want to do when they grow up, what school is actually for, the more motivated they become, the longer they stay in school, and the better their grades are, and even the better the grades of their schoolmates become. So this is to illustrate how interventions that seem relatively simple, that don't even happen in the classroom, can have really a very big effect. Lastly, I mentioned I would provide some thoughts about adult learning and vocational education and training. As I said, these might be two segments of the education and training system that really require fundamental rethinks to be able to make sure that they're adapted to all the skills requirements of the fourth industrial revolution. And the reason why I'm saying this is actually quite different for both of these segments of the education system. First of all, adult learning. I think we all agree that it's increasingly impossible, that there is lifelong learning, that workers upgrade their skills, that they become increasingly tech savvy, that they adapt to skill needs, etc. But there are actually very few examples of countries that have got this system right. There are important questions that in many cases remain to be researched, assessed, piloted, monitored, etc. And they relate to questions as whether what is the role of, let's say, an employer versus the role of a worker or the government? Who finances this type of training? Who is responsible for making sure that there's actually a sound supply of training providers who know what they're doing? Who is certifying the skills of the worker? So these are all questions that I think become increasingly important, and that people, fortunately, increasingly seem to be looking for answers for. Vocational education and training is a different aspect or a different thing. Vocational education and training has been around for a long time in many countries. Often it goes back centuries. So it's not that it's a new type of education that still needs to develop, but the problem with VET is that in most countries we can't seem to get it right. Whatever we do, employers keep on complaining that VET graduates don't have the practical skills and they can't start working in the factory or the shop immediately. At the same time that we're trying to make VET graduates job ready, we're also trying to give them those generic ability to learn, adaptable, higher order cognitive type skills that sometimes seem to contradict with what employers are asking for right after a student comes out of school. from the parents and the student side, whatever we do in most countries, there still tends to be a preference to go to universities rather than to vet schools. So there are lots of interesting initiatives going on worldwide. Some countries seem to be getting it better than others. So there are a lot of interesting developments there. One aspect I'd like to highlight about vet is actually that there seem to be a lot of really interesting things going on that would be also useful for general education and universities that don't really seem to be that well researched, possibly because vet does tend to be treated a little bit like the neglected stepchild of the education system in many places. Someone just mentioned that how important it is, for example, to make sure that teaching takes place using an approach of project-based learning and teamwork. Because those are the methodologies for which we assume that they help children acquire these socio-emotional and problem-solving skills that we think are so important. Well, this is generally not at all going on in general education, or not yet for a very long time. This does seem to be, in many cases, the standard methodology of learning and teaching in vet schools. So I'd like to leave you with that thought, and maybe I know there are other sessions coming tomorrow about vet to maybe discuss these aspects a little bit. I'm actually putting on this slide, you see a few pictures from Korea. On the left side are some vets and polytechnics in the area of Busan, where we know that a lot of really interesting interventions and a lot of financing and focus is going on vet. On the right side, it's the city of Suwon, which recently achieved an award from UNESCO as a lifelong learning city. And the reasons I included particularly these pictures is, first of all, a nod to our host of the conference, of course, but also because I think globally Korea is recognized as a very impressive innovator when it comes to innovation. So also on the aspects of vocational education and training and adult learning, I think we're all expecting to be amazed and impressed and learn from Korea in the future. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Margo. 지금 우리가 27분쯤 남았습니다. 저희들이 10분 정도는 발표자들 사이에 질의응답을 하고, 그리고 나머지 시간에는 우리 플로어에 계신 분들하고 또 주어진 질문에 대한 의견을 나누도록 하겠습니다. First, I wanted to ask Dr. Don. You mentioned about design innovation. According to Tim Brown of IDEO, he emphasized that design innovation, technology innovation, and the business innovation is three factors of innovation. And nowadays, design innovation becomes more and more important. Can you kindly explain the reason why design innovation becomes more important in the future?
Well, I guess we should probably define innovation, because it often gets mixed up with invention. And they're very, very different things. And so an invention is something that hasn't existed before, and it's imagined by someone. So if we take the case of before Henry Ford, we traveled by horse, there were no cars, just didn't exist. Whereas innovations take something that already exists and help it solve for a different problem. And I think that's where, once we start to understand that, people see that innovation is not that hard. It's just about a reframe, a rethinking. For instance, this is one of my favorite reframes. What if school was about happiness and not about educating? What would happen?
Okay, that's the difference between innovation and invention. Mm-hmm. But my main question is why design innovation becomes more important in the future?
I think that the design piece is that it's the creative piece, and we have to be creative. We have to be able to imagine, then we have to be able to create, we have to be able to innovate, and with that, we can come up with possible solutions to the future. But if you're
technology
not,
innovation is also creative,
Pardon?
isn't it? Technology innovation itself, technology innovation is creative also, isn't it?
it can, but not all creativity is not just within technology. There's plenty other ways to create. And that's
Okay.
often the confusion, that it's about technology. It's not that it's not about technology, but there's lots of other ways to create. For instance, you can design a different learning space, like we talked about earlier, which is hacking your space. That's got nothing to do with technology, but it's creative and innovation to design a space where students can learn better.
I think most of Koreans believe that solution is much more important than the problem. 어떻게 생각하세요? 문제가 중요해요? 답이 중요해요? 문제가 중요해요? 예. Maybe IPCEO. Traditionally, Korean education was focused on the teaching of solutions, not the finding problems. Yeah. It was the problem of Korea. It is the problem of Korea. And you mentioned that problem becomes more important than the solution. I think it is very important. It is the key idea for the innovation of Korean education.
Yeah, well, I guess everyone in the audience knows Albert Einstein. Well, he's famous for things like relativity was the first thing will come to mind. But he also said that if he was given 60 days to solve a problem, he would spend 55 days defining the problem and 5 days coming up with a solution. Because if you will define the problem, you'll get an incorrect solution which will cause more problems. And that's why we need to spend the time in problem defining.
Okay, thank you very much. And Professor Lim, you mentioned about creative economy in detail, and you explained 4 examples. In Korea, former president emphasized the creative economy too much, and the current president never talk about the creative economy. What do you think about the situation in Korea?
What you think about what do you mean by too much?
Former president Min-Hwa, every time she talk about the economy, she mentioned creative economy, and she established the creative economy center all around Korea. But the former president, he don't like the word creative economy. Maybe in Korea, we are the only organization using creative economy.
Well, creative economy, I mean, oftentimes a lot of these terminologies have certain fad, and I think there's an aspects of this, especially when it's being involved in public policies. I think a lot of these words have different connotation with certain leaderships and certain thoughts. Creative economy has been very much coined by the economist Richard Florida, looking at the notion of how different industries has been changing, especially focusing on the aspects of developed country and then moving forward into a new types of jobs and skill set in a context of how can we actually re-urbanize different, not re-urbanize, like supporting the urban centers throughout both United States and Canada and around the world. With that context, do we want to have more creative economy, or do we want to have a less of a creative economy? I think that beyond the terminologies and word itself, what we know for sure is the way that we have been doing things in the past. The workforce that we have today is different. We work in a society, we work in an economy. It's about creating of things that did not exist before. We work in a society that we have to come up with different solutions that did not exist before. And I think a lot of those ideas can be captured in the concepts of creative professional. I think that's very relevant. But if we want to come up with different words tonight, I'm more than happy to jump on the word games.
In my opinion, creative economy should not belong to a special president, should not belong to a special government. It is a global trend. It was the initiative of the world economy. So I hope in Korea we must focus creative economy again. It is my hope, and your address will be helpful for me. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Margo, you mentioned that Korean education system is very excellent. Still, you believe it?
Yes, actually I do.
Yes, it was, but not anymore. Korean education system was optimized to follow economy. In other words, for optimized to routine task. But you mentioned that in the future, non-routine task is increasing very fast. And the Korean education system is not suitable for that. So I hope you mentioned that Korean education system was excellent and is to be innovated in the future. Yeah, it is my hope.
I think you raise an interesting point, and I mean definitely the Korean education and training system is potentially not perfect, but really globally there is a sense that not only the performance of the current system is very, very strong, and it's seen as having been one of the driving forces of socio-economic development in the country, but it's also seen as a system that does continue to improve and to reinvent itself. Now, I think one aspect where maybe when you look at the data, some things are being missed. Is indeed those type of skills that we were talking about, the socio-emotional, the problem solving, because that's actually not what we tend to measure. So we can't compare what a Korean student learns in terms of creativity or team working skills or proactivity compared to someone in, let's say, Germany or Finland. But what we can measure and that we're comfortable about is indeed when we look at this reading, the reading, the literacy, and the mathematics score. And that is also, in terms of, let's say, the global knowledge base that we're all building, that is also a process that is slowly taking place. For example, the PISA assessment that I mentioned earlier, they're more comfortable in presenting these data on cognitive skills because they've been doing that for longer. But in the recent years, they've also increasingly focused on measuring what are problem-solving skills, for example. Yeah. And I'm sure that there will be other measures for collaboration and socio-emotional skills. And I think any other value statements on the Korean education system that's not substantiated by data, I'd be very happy to leave that to other people.
One more question. You mentioned about the importance of lifelong learning. The futurists estimate that the student may change their job maybe 10 times in their career time. It means that lifelong education becomes more important than traditional education. And I think that World Bank has some programs for the future of lifelong learning systems. Would you please explain something more about it?
There is increasingly knowledge building going on. It is yet a relatively underdeveloped area of the education and training system compared to, let's say, basic education, early childhood education, or higher education, for example. What an organization like the World Bank does is, well, it's quite varied. It's an organization, I mean, the World Bank has financed already quite a few interventions to promote adult learning. And sometimes that relates to literacy training in low-income countries. Sometimes in middle-income countries, it's much more linked to immediate private sector needs, and it relates to building skills of current employees, for example, in a particular economic sector. Sometimes it focuses on training for the unemployed, but I think what is missing globally is really a sound understanding on what is the system that needs to be in place, because it's one thing to provide some training, but it's another thing to make sure that within a region or a country or whatever geographical area or economic sector you want to focus on, there's actually a financially sustainable system in place where all actors have the right incentives and capacities to make sure that this is, let's say, as logical as sending your child to primary school.
Okay, thank you very much. And 여기서 저희들 패널 토의는 잠깐 끝내고요. From now on, we'll discuss with the audience in the floor. 제가 몇 분이 올리신 얘기들을 제가 읽어드리겠습니다. 예. 저 답을 좀 해주시기 바랍니다. First, to Dr. John Don, one question from the floor. 닥터 돈께서 보여준 프로젝트를 보니 우리 학교에서 시행하는 것과 매우 비슷합니다. 그런데 학부모들께서는 그것을 시행하면은 아이들의 성적이 떨어진다고 반대하고 있습니다. 만약에 돈 박사님이라면은 한국의 학부모를 설득하기 위해서 어떻게 할 것인지 의견을 주시기 바랍니다. You understood?
No.
No.
Sorry.
The project you mentioned is very similar to the project in his school, in his or her school.
In
but
which?
In their school.
Okay.
Yeah, but their parents don't like it because their score may be declined because of that kind of studies. So how can you persuade their parent to make your education systems?
It's a great question, because I think schools need to educate parents as much as they need to educate students, because there's been a paradigm shift in how we do stuff. And often what happens with parents, their memory of school is what they have. So when they see a different experience, they get nervous because they don't understand it. So having parent education is so important in a school, that you're bringing the parents along, explaining the process to them, and including them more, and making them part of the process, bringing them in as experts to work with the students.
I'll explain my experience. 제가 카이스트에서 중학생 80명을 뽑아서 IPCO 프로그램을 시행했는데 그 프로그램이 비슷해요. 그러니까 학부모님께서 반대가 심했습니다. 왜냐하면은 대학교를 가는데 도움이 안 된다. 그래서 제가 채택한 방식이 학부모들을 1박 2일 코스에 동참해라. 예. 자, 학부모들이 1박 2일 코스에 동참을 하고 나니까 이분들이 우리 애가 대학을 안 가도 이런 프로그램 같으면 보내겠다. 예. 그래서 저는 피부로 체험하는 게 제일 중요하다고 생각합니다. 우리 임정기 교수님, 질문이 와 있는데, 파슨에서는 이미 우수한 학생을 선발해서 교육하니까 그러한 교육이 가능할 것 같은데, 일반적인 학생들을 교육시키려면은 어떻게 하면 될까요?
글쎄요. 제가 생각했을 때는 이런 교육 과정과 이런 것들이, 제가 생각했을 때 교육이라는 것은 우리 인간들의 삶에 있어서 하나의 더블음을 줄 수 있는 것이지, 교육으로 우리가 누군가 되고 나의 아이덴티티가 어떤 학교를 갔다, 나의 아이덴티티가 어떤 거를 배웠다, 우리는 그런 사회에서 살고 있지 않다고 생각을 합니다. 지금 생각해 보세요. 저는 이 얘기를 언제나 저희 학생들한테 많이 합니다. 지금 오늘 2018년에 인터넷에 가서 직장들을 보고 그 직장들의 job description을 보세요. 그리고 4년 뒤에 졸업을 했을 때 그 job description이 똑같을까요? 전혀 아닙니다. 인더스트리나 사회들은 엄청 빠른 속도로 바뀌고 있어요. 그 과정에서 가장 중요한 것은 뭐를 특별히 배웠다는 게 중요한 것이 아니라 어떻게 이 각 사람들이 서로 스스로 생각할 수 있는 능력을 가지고 내부적인 창조성을 가지고 올 수 있는 그런 가능성이 필요한 것이죠. 그렇게 생각을 하면은 교육도 누가 이런 교육을 받고 누가 이런 교육을 받는다는 그 질문 자체에서 넘어갈 수가 있는 거죠. 세상 누구나 창조성이 내부적으로 있습니다. 우리가 가능한 것은 학교라든지 공동체에서든지 우리 사회에서든지 예술을 통해서든지 아니면은 새로운 단체라든지 그런 것들을 통해서 내부적인 창조성을 끌어나올 수 있다면은 그렇게 셀렉션 바이어스가 있는 어떤 학교에 갔다 그런 것들이 필요하지가 않겠죠.
Okay, next turn is Dr. Margo. You mentioned that learning capability is very important. And is there any method to develop the learning capability?
It's a very good question. Thank you for that. As far as I know, I mean, it depends. I mean, there will be methodologies, but I don't think, and there will be methodologies that are applied and approaches that are used in different settings. I do not think that there is a methodology of which, let's say, experts and practitioners globally agree that it has been sufficiently tested and has been demonstrated to function. And that is actually not just the case with a skill like ability to learn. This is actually the case with many of the really important skills that we talked about today. And one question is, for example, how would you actually define any of those skills? Then so before thinking about how to measure them, let's see if we can agree what they mean. And then only after we know what they mean and how to measure them, can we start testing methodologies to see whether one thing works better than others to help people acquire them. Now, this is quite complicated. Obviously, it might take a long time. And one question I think there is how far do we want to go into that road in actually defining and measuring those skills? It sounds tremendously useful because we think these skills are so important, but it's likely going to take quite some time before there are these methods that everyone is happy with. So I would personally say that it should definitely not stop people from trying and testing, even though we're not really able to measure things yet as well as we might want to.
One additional question. In the learning capability, what is the role of a mistake or failure?
It's a very. I would have to say I would not be able to answer that. I mean, I think we're not testing whether children will be able to answer a question correctly. So what we're looking at is the process about how someone arrives at defining a problem and finding a solution. And I think, for example, what the OECD is doing in their assessment of problem-solving skills is to not just look at the answer, but very much also look at the process as to how a student came to the answer. And this is, as an aside, something that can be done because these tests these days can be done on the computer. So there's all kind of data, even looking at how long a student takes to type the first words, or whether they maybe type something and then delete it. Those are all really interesting elements that can be further explored. But as I said, this is, as far as I'm aware, not yet an approach that is applied with the same level of confidence as, for example, the assessments of reading and mathematics.
Okay. And the next turn, second round of from the audience. 번역을 좀 해주시기 바랍니다. 우리 닥터 돈, 스팀 교육을 하려면은 디자이너와 같은 전문가가 필요한데 이러한 전문가를 구하기 어려울 경우 어떻게 스팀 교육을 활성화시킬 수 있나요? You understood?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with you. It is hard to find STEAM educators, but what we're finding in the US is there's a lot of programs in universities that have now started to educate STEAM educators. One place in New York, NYU, has a ITP program. It's called Inter Telecommunications Program, and we find that a lot of the students coming out from there are ready to teach STEAM. The other way that you can go about solving that problem is to take an interested teacher in your school. It could be a science teacher, it could be an art teacher, and you can send them out and get them to learn methodologies to actually teach STEAM. Because it is such a new thing, we have to look at lots of different ways that we can solve for it, and not maybe in the traditional route where you would hire a French teacher or a science teacher.
Thank you. And the last question to Professor Lim. 파슨스에서는 학생들의 창의력을 강조하고 키워주는데 창의력이 뛰어난 학생은 어떤 특징을 가지고 있으며 그러기 위해서 어떤 교육 환경과 방식이 필요한가요?
예, 아주 좋은 질문입니다. 첫 번째로 저는 머리의 길이를 봅니다. 창의력을 어떻게 우리가 메저먼트를 할 수 있는가? 참 좋은 질문이죠. 이게 힘든 게 뭐냐면 우리가 이렇게 사회에서 가장 중요하다고 생각하는 가치, 이런 창조감, 아니면 자유, 아니면 이노베이션, 혁신, 그런 것들은 이게 아이디얼이나 밸류이기 때문에 그런 것들을 quantify, 그런 거를 수치상으로 하기가 힘들죠. 하지만 뭔가 알기가 힘들 때면은 그 하나의 컨셉 그 근처에 proxy, 다른 인디케이터들이 많이 있습니다. 그래서 예를 들어서 어떤 사람은 창조성이 뛰어나다라고 하면은 여러 가지 다른 팩터들이 있겠죠. 그런 팩터들을 보고 judgment, assessment를 할 수가 있다고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 예를 들어서 얼마나 많은 숫자의 그 iteration, lo-fi prototype, we saw in that example. We also saw the example of notion of failure. 하나의 프로젝트를 할 때 얼마나 수많은 실패를 했는가, 그거의 하나의 창의력에 대한 iteration이겠죠. 또 다른 창의력으로 볼 수 있는 게 우리가 마케트를 봤을 때 이런 새로운 컨텐츠라든지 아니면 새로운 작품이 나왔을 때 비교를 해서 이 아이디어가 우리가 인간이잖아, 딱 봤을 때 얼마나 신선한가. 우리나라 같이 이런 지금 한류의 프레임이 있기 때문에 참 문화적인 이 예술 감각이 높은 시민들로서 볼 수 있어요. 이거는 재밌는 프로젝트, 이거는 색다르고 이것이 아니다. 그럼 감각이 이런 창조, 이런 크리에이티브 이코노미에서 생기게 되죠. 대중들이 하고 그런 것들이 하나의 팩터이고, 하지만 다시 한번 가장 중요한 거는 머리의 길이라고 생각합니다.
우리 머리 긴 학생들. The last question is to Dr. Margo. 한국에서는 NGO 단체의 교육기관은 오피셜하게 인정받지 못하는 경우가 많습니다. 이런 상황을 개선하기 위해서 국가와 시민이 해야 될 일을 알려주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just waiting for the translation to come through. That's a very interesting question. I can not do anything more than provide you with some let's say, general practices that you might find in countries elsewhere, because I'm not sufficiently familiar with the Korean context. That it is basically, if we're talking about official qualifications, then this tends to be a decision by the government on how this system will work. In some cases, that it can be done only by public institutions. It can be done by public and private. There will generally be a mechanism to certify or to accredit individual institutions, and then to regularly quality assure. So in principle, there are no, let's say, theoretical arguments either before or against including certain institutions or institutions of a certain legal status as institutions that provide education and training that leads to formal qualifications. In a country like Ireland, it could be even enterprises who provide some training to their workers if they go through the required and the established process. So in that sense, whether an NGO is or is not eligible to be such type of institutions very much depends on country context and preferences.
Thank you very much. 자, 우리 정말 열심히 말씀해 주시고 또 질문에 답해 주신 세 분께 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 자, 주어진 시간이 맞춰졌죠. 굉장히 많은 질문이 있는데 모든 질문을 답을 못 해드려서 대단히 죄송하게 생각합니다. 네, 감사합니다. Thank you very much.